Welcome to the Couples Expert Podcast with Stuart Fensterheim, LCSW, your source for the latest tips and practical down-to-earth advice on creating emotionally connected, thriving relationships. Now, here's Stuart.
Hi there, and welcome to the Couples Expert Podcast. Today is Wednesday, September 28th, and you've caught me in an incredibly good mood because I'm about to record a podcast that I believe will help my listeners more than anything else. And I'm sitting here in my office recording this, and one of the things I'm looking out my window, and I see that today is a gorgeous day here in Scottsdale. It is 85 degrees, a little bit of a breeze. I walked my therapy dog, Ollie, today, and he and I took a nice stroll this morning. And through that, I was thinking a lot about this podcast. And what am I going to share with all of you today that's going to make a difference in your life and in your love? And one of the things I wanted to share, though, a little bit is about me and my passion for what I do. I am 60 years old, and I've worked a lot of jobs in my lifetime. I've done everything from being a fifth grade teacher. I've sold encyclopedias. I have sold copy machines door to door. And also my dream growing up was to be a professional NFL ball player. The only problem I had with it is that I couldn't catch, I couldn't block, and I couldn't run. And my wife at the time was telling me, you can't do this. My family said, you can't be an NFL ball player. You'll never get on the field. And they were dream killers. So I got out there in junior high school. I got on the field. I got on a team. I was on the line, and a ball, I caught it. And it was time to run that touchdown. I was ready, and I was going to hear that crowd cheering. And I ran, and I crossed the goal. I think all of you know what's going to happen. But it was the other team's goal. And they got 7 points for that. And I realized this may not be what my life's passion is. My life's passion is working in this field for the last 30 years, helping all of you have a connected relationship. And I get to score touchdowns every single day in helping the two of you have a relationship that is so special and so connected that you truly understand that the two of you are in this world together, building a life. Now, the sad part about some of this is our topic for today. Our topic for today is infidelity. And there's nothing that pulls a couple further apart and creates such insecurity than one of the partners having an affair. And that really doesn't matter the kind of affair it is, whether it's an emotional affair, whether it is a sexual affair. Truly, even if it is a financial infidelity, there's nothing that hurts more than the person that you thought you can count on violating your trust. And I can't tell you how many couples that I see where that person says, or the partner, the offended partner, the partner who's did not have the affair, says, of all the people in the world I knew, this was one person that I believed this was not going to happen. It would not happen to us. I am so devastated, I don't know what to do. It is my mission in this world to help couples like that recognize that it is not the end of the world, and that the two of you can come back from that kind of disconnection. And that's why I've brought Alicia Taverner on, who's a specialist in helping women, really women primarily, but also works with couples, really come back from that period of despair to having a relationship that the two of them know that they're going to be in this together and they're going to create something different than this devastated time. And I'm really excited to bring her on. And let me tell you a bit about Alicia. She's someone that I've known for a little bit now. The two of us follow each other on social media, and in my show notes, you'll find out how to reach her and some information on her social media in case you would like to follow her there as well. And she is a MFT therapist in California, working with couples on trust violations. She is the owner of Rancho Counseling there in California. And what she does there is that she works and has contributed to a lot of magazines and podcasts and has a spot on a local radio show. And actually, we may talk about that. We'll see if we get to that. But her specialty is really helping women find the calm within the storm. And nothing more than infidelity creates a storm in a marriage, that's for sure. And she also is a trained discernment counselor and helps couples really work with exploring the options of whether or not they want to continue the relationship or not. She and I differ a little bit in this area because my belief is, as some of you know, is that if you follow the principles of attachment theory and emotionally focused therapy, there is no reason to even consider divorce because this technique will help you come back from periods of feeling alone to having a relationship. And all you have to do is not give up, and then you'll get there. And she and I will probably talk about that difference in our beliefs as we go. But I'm really excited to have her on to share her with you, to share her beliefs and her passion for helping women really come through that storm, and also as a byproduct of helping the women, helping couples really have a relationship that feels where the two of you are really in this together. So Alicia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You know, we were talking earlier about some of the video that I did this morning about sexting, and it sort of opens up a whole dialogue for you and I to talk about infidelity, the impact with women, the impact on couples. But before we even get into all of that, I'd like to have my listeners learn a little bit more about you. And one of the things that I was wondering about was how you decided to go into this field and a little bit about why you chose this area in particular with the mental health counseling.
Sure. Well, some people will say I was born knowing that I was going to be a therapist. I didn't have that experience. I kind of just went to college not knowing what I was going to do. I did have an amazing professor, and I took an intro to speech communications course. And throughout my undergrad, I took all of these courses, and then I just kept asking her, and she was my advisor. I kept asking her, well, why? We studied communication patterns. We studied the way people spoke. And I kept wanting a deeper understanding. So eventually she told me, okay, you really should have probably majored in psychology. So at the end of I think it was like my junior year, I decided to do the minor in psych, and that really felt fulfilling to me. And then, I came to her again, and when I was going to graduate, I said, well, now what do I do? And she said, well, you can get a master's degree in psychology and become a therapist. And I said, okay. The other people in my cohort were kind of doing speech therapy and things like that with the speech degree. But so anyhow, fast forward, I got my master's degree, and one of my first internships was at a homeless shelter for families. Most of them were women. And I just had this fantastic experience helping them start all over again. There were they were coming out of like domestic violence shelters. They were coming from drug and alcohol rehab or jail. And they were just at that point in their lives where they were ready to just start over. You know, they're at the bottom of the bottom. And so I really helped them to find their strengths and connect with them and build their self-esteem. Had this amazing opportunity I spent 4 years there. And
wow,
then,
that's a long time.
It is. And it was just such a rewarding experience. And so that's how I knew, you know, I love working with women. And then I went on to do a couple other things, but I just knew I wanted to come back to that. And so that's kind of how I went back into private practice after getting my license and doing all of those fun clinical hours and stuff like that. And I opened up my practice for women and couples, and I just kept seeing the infidelity and the pain, and it just kind of brought me back to that point of starting over, you know, that I was accustomed to working with in terms of my internship days. And so that's kind of how, you know, I've gotten on this passionate about the work that I do and helping couples just to start over.
So when you say starting over, that can mean a lot of different things, and it's an interesting topic because in my work with couples, one of the things that a lot of couples come to me with is the idea of, particularly if it's an infidelity. And I actually had that today when I had a couple in my office, and it was really sort of this awful experience where it was something that was the last thing she would have expected from a partner. And they talked about, kept saying, gosh, if only we can go back to the way it was before this happened. And what I generally tell couples is, no, you don't. Because if you go back to the way it was, you go back to a relationship that's susceptible to an affair. We want to create something new. And I was wondering how you handle that.
So what I tell couples is something that I learned from Esther Perel, who's a very fabulous couples therapist. And I tell them that your first marriage is over. And so, you know, people have several different marriages in the course of their lives. You know, some people will get divorced and then, you know, start again with another partner. And then I just ask the couples, do you want to start again and have another marriage with the same partner that looks very different than your first marriage? Because like you're saying, Stuart, you don't want it to look like your previous marriage because something was underlying, something was happening kind of behind the scenes that led up to the infidelity.
And it's so hard for couples to look at that because of the pain that they're in. So to be able to sort of go to, well, I'm going to take a look and sort of pull this apart is so difficult. How do you put people in a position where they're not only willing to do that, but emotionally able to do that?
That's a really good question. So I start with just hearing their story, you know, hearing where they are in terms of their relationship, in terms of how the infidelity was disclosed to them. I think that's really important to know. And I work a lot with, there's kind of the three camps of people. There's the one where one partner has been cheated on. So I just, I'll call them the injured partner, but it's not always, I think they're both injured. So, but for the sake of like the listeners and making a clarification, the injured partner, I work with them alone. Sometimes I work with a couple who's saying, okay, we want to work on this relationship. And then sometimes I also work on people who have cheated themselves and either they're trying to decide to stay in the relationship or leave, or they've already, their partner's already broken up with them and they want to understand their behavior. So it really depends on who I'm working with. But, in terms of the couple, I want to know how this was disclosed, and typically it's not disclosed, the injured partner finds out in a certain way. And then I want to leave space for both of them to have their just for them to kind of grieve. The injured partner is typically angry. They're upset. They just have a lot of anger about what's happened. And the partner who's strayed, they're also losing this other affair partner. So they have some mourning to do in terms of what's gone on in that relationship and cutting that off. And, the injured partner doesn't necessarily want to hear that. So I kind of give them opportunities so my counseling looks like with a couple, some couple sessions, couple individual sessions with each of them, and then back to couple sessions. So that I get to kind of find out where they are.
See, it's interesting because my frame of reference is as an attachment theorist or utilizing a model of connection. I tend not to separate couples because I find that the power is in trying to have them connect again. But I know a lot of people work the way you do. And I'm curious a little bit about that, about why you've chosen to separate them. Is it to give them a forum to talk about their anger? Is that what stops?
Yes.
Well, yeah. Why do you do it individually?
Yeah. So I want to give the injured partner an opportunity to share their anger. And because what they've gone through is a trauma, and their partner can't necessarily understand that sometimes. What I see a lot is the partner who's been unfaithful will say, okay, well, I said I'm sorry. I said I'm going to move on. I said I'm not going to do it again, but I just don't understand, why my partner can't get there with me. And so it kind of provides that injured partner a space to understand themselves, to understand their feelings toward their partner, to understand what it's really going to take for them in order to get there, because there's kind of a pacing issue, and then the other partner who's cheated, like I said, they've broken up with somebody that they might have felt like they were in love with. And so that injured partner doesn't want to hear about this other relationship. So that gives them a space to kind of process that a little bit. And also for them to also understand and gain clarity about what it's really going to take. So I kind of have this meeting with them so that I can help them understand what it's going to take for them to repair this relationship and the things that they can expect individually.
It's fascinating because this topic especially is such a difficult area that so many people work so differently. Because my approach is a little different than yours, and I want to make sure that the listeners understand that neither approach is all right or all wrong.
Exactly.
And that, because for me, part of what I want to do is to help them talk about the anger with one another. And yes, it's sometimes really, really tough to be sitting there hearing your partner being so furious with you. But I think as in your approach, but just a little differently in terms of the model, whether we go individual or just stay with them as a couple, you have to go through the anger.
Yes.
And you have to get to the other side. And typically, I think anger being a surface emotion, we find underneath that something else. And that's really the work, isn't it?
Right. Yes. It's helping them understand what's happened in their relationship to get them to this point. And I think one of the major myths that we have in our society is that happy couples don't experience infidelity. If you have a good relationship, it should be good enough and your partner's not going to cheat or you're not going to cheat. But that's not the case. And I'm sure you're probably familiar with Shirley Glass's work. And, she has her book called Not Just Friends. And she talks a lot about her research in that happy couples, just because they're happy on the outside and they don't argue, it doesn't mean that their relationship is affair proof.
Right. And I think what makes it a fair proof for the lack of discussion calling it that is when you really recognize. And the trick is, how do we get to this? But when you recognize your partner is really the best thing that ever happened to you. And if we can get couples to really begin to talk from a vulnerability place.
Yes,
from a place
I really like how you said that.
Yeah, because from a place of, we start on the surface, we may have an affair that has occurred, and that is really that's really trying to understand. And I think what happens for couples, and I definitely want to hear how you approach this whole concept of saying, I'm sorry, because people jump to that so quickly, particularly the offending partner, because they don't want to deal with the pain that comes with looking their partner in the eye and recognizing what they've done and how it's pulled them apart. But people go to apologizing so fast, but you don't even know what you're apologizing for.
Right. So it's about, for me in my practice, it's about helping them understand the contributing factors, which led to the infidelity, which are so vast. There's so many reasons why people will cheat, and so helping them understand that, but also, the words I'm sorry, and I like how you said, what does it really mean? Because I like to help my clients so that I want to know from the injured partner, like, what do you need from this person who said they were going to be faithful, who said that they were going to be with you forever, but who broke your trust? What do you need from them in order for you to feel like you can move on? And so that's a lot of the work, kind of getting down to that, because sometimes the injured partner doesn't necessarily know what they need. And so I think that's why those individual sessions are helpful too. Kind of going back to that point, those are some of the things that I help them uncover. What do you need from your partner in order to decide that you're going to move forward?
Right. And one of the questions that always comes up with that is, how will I know it won't happen again? Yep. And that's, I would think most people, women especially, but I take that back, because one of the things, myths I'm trying to blast away in this podcast and also in my practice, is that men don't have that kind of fragility, because they absolutely do.
Oh, of course.
But a lot of people, you look at men as he's the tough guy. He's the one, he doesn't really have all these feelings. But truthfully, if we scratch away at the surface a little bit, we have a very needy individual here. And the whole concept of not doing it again, and how do I know, how do I get to a place where I can say, I could just relax with this?
So I think there's two parts to that. The one thing is that you don't know. We never know. We never know what's going to happen with anything in the future. Life and in general is so unpredictable. But there are definitely ways that I work with my clients to rebuild trust. And it's not necessarily through give me your passwords, let me check your cell phone. I think that the trust is built, and there's a time and a space for that, but eventually it moves toward the little things that mean the most between the couple. Their trust is going to be built by them having positive communication patterns, by them learning how to speak each other's love language, being able to feel as though they are number one in their partner's life. But life is so unpredictable, and you don't know. They didn't know in the first place when they, got married. Nobody comes into my office and says, I meant to cheat. When I got married, I knew I would have an affair. No, everybody says
never.
I never thought this would.
Never will I do it.
I never thought I would be this person, or I never thought this would happen to me.
Right. And what we don't know is, and I think the question that comes up is, how do we stop that feeling of loneliness that comes up? Because what I believe, and I think, and I would assume that you're on the same wavelength, and if not, I'd like to know, is, people like to think of affairs as a sexual act.
Yeah.
It's far from a sexual act.
It's far from sexual act. And yes, that relationship, the affair relationship is very appealing because it exists in a vacuum and on an island. It's all about sex or all about, fulfilling these lustful feelings and emotions with this other person. But there's just so many other contributing factors that lead to that. You can be having wonderful sex with your partner. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to cheat. And it goes back to what's happening in your own life to make you feel empty.
Right. And having good sex doesn't mean you don't feel lonely.
Right. Mm-hmm. So it's a lack of connection. But I think a lot of people cheat because they want to feel alive. They want to feel something more. It's kind of like this oomph, and that's probably that's probably not describing it as fantastic as it is in the moment. But I mean, if you think about all of the hormones and things, that the cortisol, and it's like a drug, that type of feeling. And that's typically what people will describe their relationship as when they first got married or when they were first dating, like this. And it clouds their vision. It clouds their decision making because they're just so high on this feeling. But what is it that caused them to need that feeling in the first place? It could be so many things. Was there a death in their family? I hear moms will say, well, after I had my kids, I just felt like I was dead inside. I felt like my partner didn't notice me, or, there's just so many reasons, like the birth of a child or just the feeling of excessive responsibility and everything that affairs represent, which is like spontaneity and just this in the moment type relationship and very sexual, and feelings are just overwhelming. That's not what happens in a long-term relationship. A long-term relationship, and especially when you're rearing children, that's built on responsibility. It's built on
not
schedule. Yeah. It's built on like everything that's very predictable. Life has to become very predictable to be a good parent, to have this family atmosphere. And so what is it that's caused you to look outside your marriage for something other than that predictability?
Right. And I think one of the things I've had a couple of people on the show who work with new moms. And one of the things that both of these people really talked very strongly about is the lack of preparation that families do in preparing for the stress and strain that comes with having children. And if you don't talk about how are we going to keep our relationship alive with the new baby, with the when 1 and 1 doesn't equal 2, but it equals 10, when you have a second one, how are we going to deal with that in having both of us still feel like we're attractive and, appealing to one another?
Yes, you have the birth plan, that goes wrong in the hospital, and everybody's there when the baby's first born. But then after that, everybody goes away, and, you didn't plan for that. You didn't plan for what the sleepless nights would look like. You didn't plan for just what life in general would look like, the predictability would be like.
You brought up an interesting point a couple minutes ago that I wanted to come back to, where I don't think you even realized when you were talking earlier, you mentioned this thing about, I think you said about a private detective. And I have so many couples that come into my office, or an individual, I guess I would get this more likely, and they say, should I hire a private detective? And I'm sure you see that a lot or hear that from people. What do you usually say to that?
Well, I ask them what the purpose is. What are you going to gain from hiring a private detective for, to find out if your partner's really being unfaithful?
Right.
And what will that mean to you if they are? Are you going to want to stay in the relationship? Are you going to want to know details? Are you going to want to see pictures, and why? So that's a really important conversation that I have with an injured partner. What are you going to glean from
From the information.
Yeah, from the information.
Yeah. And the other thing I usually tell people is if you're considering it, you're already in trouble. I think you need to deal with this.
I think you need to trust your gut. Why are you considering hiring a private detective?
Right. And what gets in the way of you asking that directly?
Yeah. So then that does tell me that's a huge red flag for a communication problem that's existed in the relationship. And is it existing because of this affair? Likely no. It's probably been in existence during the course of these people's relationship. And so let's talk about that.
Right. And coming back to our discussion a couple minutes ago about, when is it time to apologize, or what is your recommendation about that? And do you have, because what I get asked a lot is, what is an apology look like even? How should that happen? What steps should I take, or should I accept the apology? What do you guide couples with in how to really do that?
I think that comes from the injured partner, and like I said before, helping them understand, what do you need from your partner to feel like they're ready to move forward and they're ready to start regaining that trust. So there is kind of a process where we talk about that. And then when they get there and they feel like, okay, I've gotten all of these things, then yes, we do a kind of a formal apology session where, sometimes I will help the cheating partner write a letter. And so again, that comes in like the individual sessions. What does this need to include? How do you want your partner to feel when they read this apology? Because like you were saying a few minutes ago, is like that initial, well, I'm so sorry. And that's kind of just like the knee-jerk reaction. But after kind of going through therapy for a while and finding a deeper understanding, I think that they can make a much more sincere apology. But also, I think it should include what you're going to do differently. These are the things that I'm going to work on. These are the things that I'm committed to working on, not just as a couple, but also as an individual. Do they need to be seen individually as well by another therapist who can help them work on some of the character flaws or some of the things that they've learned in couples therapy that's contributed to them being unfaithful.
And I think the hardest dialogue undoubtedly is when couples have to talk about what is it that the injured party did to contribute to this happening. And
yes.
I think that is probably the most difficult dialogue.
It is a difficult dialogue, and I put it gently and I put it bluntly, and through many of my blog posts, but it takes two. This person didn't cheat, by themselves. I mean, yes, they did the act by themselves, but something was going on in the relationship, and what were you contributing? And I've had, clients who they get a little upset with that. Well, what do you mean? I was here. I did the things. I cleaned the house. I cooked the food. I did what I was supposed to do as a wife, and he cheated, or vice versa. And so that's when, you kind of have to de-escalate. And then sometimes I have to let it go for a little while and then circle back to, okay, let's talk about some of your responsibilities and some of what you may have done to contribute to the affair, maybe unknowingly.
Right. And going back to the whole question of can I be sure that this doesn't happen again? I think the thing to look at, or have the person look at, is if you don't have that dialogue, then you never know what is it that needs to be done differently from both of you to assure that your partner sees their needs as being met in this relationship, so that they don't feel like they have to reach anywhere else to get those emotional and physical needs met.
That's so right on. Unless they understand that. And when they start to understand that, it does become less about are you going to do it again? It becomes more about what are we going to do in the future? You know, they're able to see themselves as a couple together in the future. And that's kind of the magic. That's the spot that I try to get to.
And, you know, it seems like, and I'm sure just from what I know about you and your caring nature and how giving you are to the people that you work with and what you do, is the beauty of the work is really that moment, isn't it?
It is, yes. I have a huge smile on my face and, you know, thinking about that moment and thinking about the couples who have stuck it out and gotten to that moment, you know, as a human being. And, you know, Stuart, being a therapist yourself and being in this caring position, there is struggle to get there, but it's so fulfilling and so rewarding when you can walk a couple through that. And however long it takes, you know the ins and outs of what it's taken for them to get there and what a magical and wonderful place that is for them to be.
You know, and the whole question of, is it worth it? Should we stay together? Is it all worth it? What I tell people is the only thing that stops you from getting to a place that has you feeling like the two of you truly have overcome this is giving up. And if you don't give up, anything is possible.
Yeah.
If you do it together.
Agree.
If you do it together.
And you're both willing to look at yourselves and be honest about what you're seeing and honest about who you are and who you want to be. And everybody needs help. So, you know, sometimes the pride gets in the way, the ego. And when people can get to a place of, okay, I'm ready to do the work.
You know, I want to just really thank you for coming on and giving of yourself, giving of your time. And it's just wonderful to have people out there that just care so much for my listeners and wanting to help them. And before we stop, though, I'd like to ask you a question, which is about you a little bit. And in doing this work, you know, I'm always learning about myself, and I'm always surprised sometimes of my own growth. In working with these couples, particularly with the trust violations, what have you learned about yourself that surprised you?
That's a good question. I think I learned about my ability to empathize with someone who's strayed, because before I started really diving into the infidelity work, you know, I was kind of that woman that I hear a lot of women, you know, well, if that ever happened, you can expect your bags to be outside.
Out the window, right?
Yeah, exactly. But in working with this population, working with these issues, I've come to find a deep empathy for those who have been unfaithful. That is sometimes difficult for others to understand because they have that stance. You know, I draw the line here. If you cheat on me, we're not going to be together. But what I see is somebody who's hurting, somebody who's not feeling fulfilled, somebody who's not feeling alive enough in their relationship. And so for me, it's really empathizing with that point and being able to understand that. And that surprised me a lot because I get it, you know, and I don't have any judgment about it. And so I can do that work and I can support each side of the couple, you know, the injured partner and the partner who strayed.
That's pretty cool, actually. That, you know, we all learn these things about ourselves. And I think it takes a special person to really help couples in this kind of pain because it's tremendous. And I think that's also a message that I want to share with all of the listeners and your audience and my audience, which is there really isn't another pain any bigger than this in a marriage.
No.
And that you need to look at not only why you had the affair, but why didn't you walk the other way? When you were attracted to someone, when it felt like, you know, we all have a little bit of a sign, I think, that our emotions are getting sort of stirred up. And why not turn to your partner at that point and say something pretty risky, perhaps, saying that I'm having these feelings and I don't want it to continue. I want to work on us. Mm-hmm. And so many people don't do that.
I think it's so scary. And that's telling about the relationship, though.
Right.
That's telling about the level of intimacy and the level of connection and trust that's already there.
Right. And reaching out to someone like yourself, if you can't do that or if you're not sure how to do that, and saying, help me with this because no one matters more than this person.
Yeah.
And we all do these kinds of things that just really mess us up. And so it is really just really thrilling to me to share you with my audience, to really let them know that you're out there. And if people want to get hold of you or want to sort of email you or whatever, and I'm going to have this in the show notes, everyone, but I want you to sort of share with my listeners how they could get hold of you, please.
So the best way would be to visit my website, which is ranchocounseling.com. I have lots of free, I have tons of blog posts about infidelity, videos about communicating with your partner. So there's a lot of free resources and, other podcast episodes and things that they can get some more information about this topic. And
you have a gift for them, don't you?
I do, yes. So for anybody who is struggling through infidelity and you are an injured partner, I'm a huge proponent of journaling through this process. And so I have a free PDF of some of the top journal prompts that I've used in session with clients to help them find understanding about where they are in terms of their relationship and help them heal through this process.
Right, and that's a gift from her to my listeners and anyone watching and I guess listening more than watching this episode. If you click on the link, you'll get a download and be able to have that gift from Alicia. So, Alicia, thank you again, and we'll talk to you all next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode with your host, Stuart Fensterheim. You're one step closer to reigniting that fiery passion with your partner. For more information and your 30-minute free phone consultation with Stuart, visit www.thecouplesexpertscottsdale.com. We'll see you next time.